Dr. Juan Flores is sitting by. Good morning, Dr. Juan.
Good morning.
Right on. So we had your public school counterpart, Superintendent John Fernandez, on last week, just kind of going over everything that's going on with the reopening of schools. So, of course, wanted to fold you into the convo and find out on your end when we're going back to school and how's it going to be different from last school year.
Well, the first school that's opening up is Father Duenas on August 2nd, and then the other schools will follow. I think the last one will open on August 11th. And all of the schools are planning for face-to-face instruction, with only a couple of schools offering distance learning in addition to face-to-face instruction. So pretty much they're following up on what we started last spring, which is to go to face-to-face instruction for the majority of the students, if not all of the students at the schools. That's what the schools are planning on.
And what types of improvements were you guys able to make with some of those ESF funds and other federal funds you guys got?
Probably the most significant that have been in place now for a couple months is getting the plexiglass sneeze guards in the elementary schools for the classrooms, sneeze guards for cafeterias for the high schools, HEPA filters in all the classrooms. All of the rooms will be set up so there'll be at least a 3 feet distance between students in any direction. We received the guidance from public health about the CDC recommendations for masks and vaccinations, and so each school is determining how they're dealing with that. CDC is saying that if the students are vaccinated, masks are not required. And that's a little bit of a challenge for the schools, because one of the things the schools don't want to do is to have to be the ones to go around and validate whether or not students have been vaccinated. So the schools individually will decide if they're going to require the mask for everybody, if they're going to require the mask just for those students who are not vaccinated, and then each school will determine how they're going to validate or confirm whether or not students have been vaccinated. There's no archdiocesan policy requiring vaccinations, so that's going to be up to the parents to determine that. And they're returning to school. More likely than not, most of the schools are going to require that all the students will wear masks at the school, so they don't have to single out those students who are above 12 years old who have not been vaccinated.
What about, do you guys have any stats or numbers in terms of the vaccination rate of the teachers in private schools or employees?
I'm sorry, Sabrina, I didn't hear that.
Do you guys have any numbers for the vaccination rate for teachers and support staff?
I would say that the majority of the teachers have been vaccinated, and in the high schools, the majority of students have been vaccinated. I don't have the percentages for each school, especially for the elementary schools, because again, the kids 12 and under or under 12 don't have access to the vaccines right now. So the schools are collecting that, and parents, when I ask the schools, are welcome to do so. I haven't made a big deal of it, only because, again, there's no requirement for the vaccination. So without that requirement for the vaccination, the schools will handle those situations to ensure that students are not, or to reduce the chance that the virus will be transmitted. Some of the schools are definitely encouraging students to get tested, and that's also, some of the schools are also doing that for teachers. But all of those issues right now, the CDC requirements are the minimal requirements, and so anything above and beyond those requirements are up to the discretion of the individual schools.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you got guidance from public health, which is inclusive of the CDC, the latest CDC guidelines. When did you receive that? Because I know GDOE was mentioning they were hoping to receive the final guidance from public health last week Friday.
Well, they sent those, the public health sent the CDC guidelines maybe 2 weeks ago. And so the schools reviewed those guidelines and tried to determine how they're going to meet them. Now, almost every single one of those guidelines and protocols have already been followed by the schools in terms of social distancing, washing your hands, things like that. The difference there is in dealing with the masks. And so that's the issue that each school is deciding on, whether the students will be required to wear the masks, or if those masks are only going to be required of those students who have not been vaccinated. But those CDC guidelines were produced by Public Health, and I've asked if Public Health is going to come out with additional guidelines. I have not received a response regarding that. So my understanding is, and the last governor's executive order said that we would follow the lead of the CDC guidelines.
Okay. What about bus transportation? Have you received anything, guidance on?
There are 6 schools that are trying to avail themselves of bus transportation, and the Department of Public Works is working directly with each of those schools. So hopefully they'll get schedules. Well, Father Duenas needs a schedule because they start on Monday, a week from today. But the the schools have confirmed that they have been contacted by Public Works regarding the bus transportation.
I wanted to ask your take on this bill. Is it Bilbrey?
Yes, there's a bill.
Yeah, there's a bill
regarding the requirement for
charter
the proposed
schools.
requirement.
Yeah, so I guess they're trying to require charter schools to get their teachers certified.
You know, I actually checked in with a couple of members of the Educator Certification Commission, because I thought maybe that was being brought up by them, and it was not brought up by the commission. One member of the commission mentioned to me that she's not in favor of it because she feels that the charter schools, by virtue of being charter schools, are trying to set up school systems that, while they are publicly funded and provide public education for those students, that the schools should determine what kind of an education the kids will receive. There's no doubt that certification assures that there are some supports for making sure that teachers in the schools have the background, the knowledge and skills to be teachers. But I have to tell you that many of the teachers in the Catholic schools are not certified, and yet we still have students being successful in the Catholic schools. Now, there are other factors, obviously, besides certification, but when I read the bill, I think the greatest concern I had was most of the research in the introduction of the legislation referred to information provided from the 1990s, and most of that research might be out of date because that was when charter schools were just starting, and or at least most of the charter schools were just starting. So I think that maybe one of the things that needs to be reviewed is there actual data showing that the certification of teachers in charter schools is a contributing factor to the success of the students in the schools, because that's the bottom line, right? And can charter school students continue to perform at least at the same level as other public school students, even if the teachers are not certified? From my perspective, even with certified teachers, the onus is on the schools and the school district and the other teachers to ensure that effective teaching and learning is going on in the classroom. Whether that takes place with certified teachers or non-certified teachers, I think may not be as relevant as whether or not effective teaching and learning is actually going on. And so, by virtue of charter schools being different from non-public schools, from the other public schools, where parents get a choice of what the charter schools support, it's hard for me to support that legislation. But I think that the intent of the bill is to ensure that publicly funded schools will have teachers with whom the students will have a fighting chance to be effectively taught in the schools. And I think that should be the focus of any legislation that addresses concerns about charter schools.
I wanted to follow up and see whether or not you had any reaction as the superintendent of Catholic schools to this judgment that came out recently by the District Court of Guam Chief Judge regarding schools and parishes being included as assets. And this is part of that the bankruptcy case and tied in with the sex abuse cases. So did you have any kind of response? I mean, are we going to see, some of these private schools being sold off to help pay off some of the debt that's owed by the Archdiocese?
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, I obviously have gut feelings about that and feel that the schools and the parishes can be treated independent of the Archdiocese. But to be frank, I don't know enough about what the legal backgrounds are that led to the judge's decision, and so it might not be fair for me to comment on it. I will say that it will have an effect on all of us in terms of our responses to what continues to happen in the ongoing cases. But again, my lack of knowledge of the legal implications, not the legal implications, but maybe the legal background that went into those decisions, it makes it irresponsible for me maybe to say, oh, I agree with it, or I disagree with it. I will say that I think it will have an impact on the schools, and so it's for us to see what actually happens because of that.
Okay. All right.
I wanted to go back to the certification because I actually had a call from a irate listener who says certification is certification. Charter schools are publicly funded, and I want to say I know you're on the board for the Career Tech Charter School, right? So, just I guess with your charter school hat, what would you say to that criticism that we're publicly funding these schools and the standard of teacher certification should be upheld?
Again, Chris, I think that the commitment on the part of the charter schools, as written in their charters, is to ensure that there's effective teaching and learning in the schools. Now, if it means the principal needs to be in the classroom more often because those teachers are not certified, half of my teaching career, I've taught for 15 years in K-12 education. Half of those years, maybe even more than half, were spent in non-public school environments. And I have to tell you that effective teaching and learning went on. But I will also tell you that either my department coordinators or the head of the school or division chairs were always involved in whether or not I was teaching effectively. They wanted to make sure I didn't just walk into a classroom, put my feet up on the table and give the kids Xerox papers to fill out. And I think that could be the commitment on the part of the charter schools. Now, there are some things in the certification requirements that clearly ensure that students will be provided with teachers, like passing the praxis. But just having the courses that lead to certification is not a guarantee that those teachers are going to be effective. I think the proof is in what happens when those teachers are in the classrooms. And I think that's incumbent on the charter schools to ensure that when students walk into a classroom, that the teachers know what they're teaching, they know how to teach, they know how to address students' needs, they know how to assess the students so the students will get the best education. The same way certified teachers could do it, it would be irresponsible to say that all certified teachers do that. I remember making a statement to the late Ben Pangilinan way back in saying that I think teaching is easy. I think it's good teaching that's hard. And I think there are good teachers, even great teachers in our DOE schools and there are good and even great teachers in our charter schools right now because they know how to address the needs of the students and they know how to ensure that the students' needs are being met.
Okay. Bree, anything else?
Yep.
Wow. So
Can I make just one last
Of
comment
course.
about that? If the certification, and when I read the legislation, my first reaction was that I applaud the legislature or the senators who introduced that legislation. I wish that they would go one step further, that if they were going to require certification of the teachers, that they look also at equitable funding for charter schools, because right now, the charter schools are getting maybe half of the allocation of what the DOE schools are getting in terms of per pupil costs. And one of the reasons why charter schools are hiring non-certified teachers, it's not the most important reason, is some of those teachers who are not certified are willing to teach for salaries that are less than DOE schools because they believe in the charter schools and they support the principles of the charter schools. And the mission of the charter schools, and I think that should be recognized. But if the expectations are going to increase, then along with that legislation should be legislation ensuring that charter schools, which are publicly funded, will get the same equitable allocation of funds from the government of Guam as the DOE schools do, and that's just to ensure that all students are receiving the same amount of support from the government and they're not discriminated against because of that.
and just for the record again, the private school teachers in the Catholic school system are not certified?
Some of them are not. There are some who are, not all of them, and it's not a requirement in the Catholic schools that they be certified.
So what about the ones who are? Do they just feel like, oh, I want to bring something extra to the table, or is there a rhyme or reason?
If you met some of those teachers who are certified and are getting lower pay than Catholic schools, it's out of their goodness of their heart. It's their commitment to Catholic education. Some of them are retired Guam teachers, DOE teachers, who've decided that that's one way of continuing their careers, but the salary is not important. Many of the teachers in the Catholic schools make the sacrifices because they believe in what the school offers, and like being part of a community that's committed to Catholic education.
Thank you, Juan. Appreciate it, and good first day of school going out. That FD starts Monday, right? A week from today.
Correct, on the
Okay.
2nd.
All right. Okay, Doc. Dr. Juan Flores, Catholic Schools Superintendent.